How is the United States addressing the homeless crisis? The situation seems to be driven by profit, creating a highly lucrative industry. The budget allocated for this issue was $808 million in 2022, reflecting a staggering 1,300% increase over the past 7 years.
America has a homelessness crisis as record numbers of people are ending up on the streets in a few concentrated city centers. Cities are spending billions of dollars on failing projects to try and solve this problem, which has attracted a growing list of companies happy to provide their services for a price. Helping the homeless has become a lucrative business, with multi-million-dollar government contracts awarded every day. But if there's so much money to be made, do these companies really want a long-term fix?
Over how much Austin's new homeless shelter is
now
going
to hundreds of homeless
taxpayers.
families being housed in hotels across the state because there's no more room left in emergency shelters.
49 apartments for the homeless, built at a whopping $739,000 a unit.
According to a report by the consulting firm McKinsey and Co., the annual budget for the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority rose from $63 million in 2015 to $808 million in 2022, a 1,300% increase in just 7 years. And what did the hardworking taxpayers of Los Angeles get for their money? The number of homeless people went up by 56%. Ignoring for the moment that everybody deserves the right to affordable, comfortable shelter, there is something not quite adding up here. A closer look at individual programs like the Inside Safe Homelessness Reduction Policy doesn't make it much better. The idea of this program was to have social workers offer hotel rooms to homeless individuals while they sought out longer-term housing arrangements. Data collected by the city and compiled by local news outlet The Center Square found that the plan had cost $250 million over just 1 year. The program only served 1,463 individuals, which works out to be $17,000 per individual per month. That is over $200,000 every year being spent on one individual in one program in just one city in America. So where the f*** is all this money going? And at what point would it be easier to give homeless people checks for 3 times the national salary? Well, there are 3 reasons why cities across America and the rest of the world are spending more money than ever on this problem while not making it any better. The first reason is the broken structure trying to fix a difficult problem. Hanlon's razor is an adage that says you should never attribute malice to what is adequately explained by stupidity. With so much taxpayer money funding failed programs, you might think of evil corporations profiting off the misery of society's most vulnerable. But that isn't the biggest problem. Most people involved in homeless relief efforts are making below average incomes and are really trying to make a difference. Most of them, not all of them. But you will see that later. The homeless industrial complex is actually a combination of bad management structures, bad incentives, and bad market conditions. Tim Campbell is a journalist and public auditor who wrote an article about the organizations involved in this industry and the failures of their process. The Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority is a joint powers authority that gets funding from federal, state, county, and city budgets, but it doesn't actually do any of the work itself. According to the authority's own website, the LAHSA offers funding, program design, outcomes assessment, and technical assistance to more than 100 nonprofit partner agencies that assist people in experiencing homelessness achieve independence and stability in permanent housing. So they are a middleman between funding and over 100 nonprofits. They give the money to these organizations to achieve goals, like offering hotel rooms to people until they can get back on their feet, and then assess the performance after a project has been finished to determine if it was successful or not. With so many organizations all doing different things, proper oversight is very difficult. In the 2022-2023 fiscal year, just over $40 million of the Homeless Authority's revenue was spent on administration. The organization that only runs a few programs of their own has over 750 employees, primarily dedicated to liaising with their nonprofit partners, overseen by highly paid executives including the CEO of public organization Valencia Adams-Kellum, who is paid a base salary of $430,000 per year according to public records. Attractive compensation is important in any company. If you offer low compensation, you should expect bad results, which is not what such a troubled organization needs. But according to Salary Cube and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, this is roughly double the pay of the average CEO for organizations of this size in the private sector. But that's not actually the biggest problem. Most of the money entering this program goes to nonprofit partners. But since each of them are contracted for niche roles across dozens of different programs, the real work is bogged down in endless siloing of responsibilities and overhead. In his article, Tim Campbell talks about an experience where one agency provides outreach, another operates a shelter, a third provides support services, a fourth builds supportive housing, and a fifth manages housing's operations. Even though these are nonprofit organizations, they all want to protect their role so their people can keep their jobs, and they frequently get into turf wars over whose responsibility is what. They also don't have a direct line of communication to one another, since all reporting goes back through the LAHSA. Something like booking a hotel room for someone to spend the night in took the involvement of 10 nonprofit organizations, the police, hotel staff, and an oversight team at the LAHSA. That makes it almost impossible for the authority to provide assessment of the performance of a program because it gets bogged down in endless "that wasn't my job" between all the unrelated nonprofits it works with. That would be bad enough if it wasn't for the fact that the Housing Authority isn't even the central authority within Los Angeles. Within just this one city, different homeless issues are handled by the LAHSA, the Chief of Housing and Homeless Solutions, County Homeless Services, the California Department of Housing and Community Development, the Federal Interagency Council of Homelessness, in addition to federal, state, city, and local police departments. Every agency has overhead, like offices and administration staff, that take money away from fixing the problems at hand. And that's before you learn about the people that are deliberately taking advantage of all of this for profit. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why throwing money at complicated problems is not fixed. Staff working in dangerous areas on a volunteer basis or for very little pay are not part of a shadowy cabal to profit off the homeless epidemic. But there are other players in this game. A major problem caused by the disjoint departmentalization of services is that recipients can pick and choose what programs they access and what programs they reject. The individual organizations within this sprawling private-public structure have no way to stop recipients being very selective with their services, and according to multiple insiders, they actually encourage it. Kevin Dahlgren is a former social services worker who has written about his experiences working in a Housing First center in Portland, Oregon. Housing First was a federal initiative to fix homelessness by giving people homes, but other services like addiction treatment, mental health support, and workplace training were handled separately. People can't have government treatment programs forced upon them unless they are institutionalized, which would only make the situation worse. The result of the program, according to Dahlgren and other service workers, is that homeless housing buildings would not provide a place for people to stay off the streets, but would just concentrate all the problems that put people there in the first place. If you ever wanted to see clear proof that this is a complicated issue, then you should know that Dahlgren, who has been a tireless advocate for support services reform, was recently arrested on charges of alleged identity theft involving the disadvantaged people he previously worked with. He has pled not guilty, but the case is still ongoing. The data itself backs up his point, though. The uptake of housing programs has been higher than the uptake of support programs across the country. A study by the University of Chicago on permanent housing solutions found that many homeless people actually avoid these services because they see them as more dangerous than being on the street. Advocacy groups claim the stereotype of housing centers being dangerous is a damaging myth. But if they really were safe, then it gets even harder to justify spending so much money on such poor results. In an interview with CNN, Jason Elliott, a senior advisor on homelessness to Governor Gavin Newsom, defended the state of California spending $17.5 billion. That much money would have been enough to just pay rent at market rates for every homeless person in the state, with around $4 billion left over. Elliott pointed out that this wouldn't work, because of the significant behavioral health challenges these people face, requiring housing solutions to have controls in place. Okay, there is more than just bad management at play here. All of this chaos is covering up the second reason that homelessness is getting worse while costing you more. California, New York, and Oregon have been heavily featured so far, because they have the highest rate of homelessness in the country, and it should be no surprise that the problem of people not having a house has a lot to do with those houses themselves. These states attract a lot of people, who move to them for career opportunities, and they have expensive real estate markets. As someone who has lived in both San Francisco and LA, I witnessed the problem of unaffordable housing myself. Since moving here, I have had good paying jobs as an investment banker, and now as a full-time YouTuber. But even then, I have struggled to afford a small apartment. I am grateful to be a lot more financially stable now, but fresh out of college, if I lost my job and couldn't find a new one within weeks, I would have to move back home. A study by the University of California, San Francisco found that the #1 reason why people experience homelessness was simply because they lost their income in cities where a place to live is expensive. The study also found that a vast majority of surveyed respondents could have avoided homelessness with a subsidy of less than $300 a month, which is already far cheaper than the cost to help someone once they are already homeless. A clear criticism of housing programs in these states is the cost of the housing solutions themselves. The San Diego Housing Commission is planning to use $150 million in state funding to purchase a 400-room extended stay hotel that could be quickly converted into housing. That's a per-unit cost of $383,000 for something that is not much more than a basic hotel room with a kitchenette. The purchase was defended by the government and real estate experts in an article by the San Diego Tribune, because it simply wasn't possible to find housing close to services like public transport for less than that in the city. If $300 a month could prevent the city from buying more of these units, that would clearly pay for itself. But at what point are taxpayers just subsidizing rent for people moving to LA to become an actor? And that's the third reason why homelessness is only getting worse. It's become a political football. The UC San Francisco study also looked at common claims like the one that homeless people are moving to California because services here are better than what they could receive in other states. Politicians from both sides of the aisle will make this claim as a way to discredit the support efforts of other states, or the soft-handed approach of California. The study actually found that 90% of surveyed people suffering homelessness became homeless while already living in California. Okay, so people do move here, but they are only a minor part of the problem. This is a big issue that affects lots of voters. People want a solution to this problem because nobody likes to see other people struggling, and they are also sick of having their cars broken into or their streets filled with tents and droppings. Politicians can score easy points by coming up with a new solution to lump on top of the old solutions, or by pointing out that their constituency is not having the same problem. Politicians also can't do much about the existing problems because they employ so many people. The cobweb of intergovernmental ineffectiveness might not be very good at getting people off the streets, but it is very good at providing employment. Every nonprofit, government authority, administrative department, and private sector provider in this mess is keeping people in a job. A more efficient solution would yield better results, but nobody wants to be the politician responsible for getting rid of that many jobs. I am working on an article covering the more controversial aspects of this issue over on my totally free email newsletter Compounded Daily, which you can find in the video description. I don't have to worry about the algorithm over there, so I'm free to bring you stories that wouldn't do well here. Suffice it to say, this whole problem has not been helped by one of the groups that is profiting off this incompetence: the media companies farming outrage for clicks.